Oh wait, that's not a Lazy Susan?
No, that's definitely not a Lazy Susan. How do I show a burger in a completely different way and not do it in CGI? That's how much light you would need to shoot F14 at 1,000 frames is painful.
What is going on, Indie Mogul? My name is Ted, and today in the studio we have Steve Giralt. He's basically an amazing commercial cinematographer and visual artist who has shot some of the most iconic shots out there. Shot for brands like Hershey's, Pepsi, Jack Daniels. And today we're going to be going over a couple of Steve's most iconic shots, talking about how they were actually made, how they were shot, how they were lit, what camera he used, and how learning a little bit about robotics and machinery might actually help you be a better filmmaker. So Steve, when you get a project, how do you actually find the story in every product that you shoot?
It usually involves a lot of questions I start with. Like I have to ask, what's their brand about? What are the things that they do that makes their brand unique? Once again, I'm telling a story about a brand and a product almost all the time. So for me, that's like step number one is like understanding the brand and what I'm trying to accomplish. And then from that, I do look a little bit at like competitors and other work people have done. And the next thing is just like, okay, how do I do this differently? How do I make this really cool? And usually for that, part of like my process in my head is like, can I be inside the product? Can I be around the product? Can I see the product from a different way? Can we take it apart? Or with time too, like either do I really speed something up or do I really super slow it down and like look at that in a different way. Obviously the thing, which you can't change that much about what the thing is, but then there's also how you could look at that thing.
Does the question ever come up when you're thinking about this stuff? Is this actually possible or not?
Oh yes, absolutely. Usually I try to do a very, 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 very basic test of some sort of how this thing might work. Like I was bidding like a nacho cheese thing and I was like, oh, well, how does cheese stick to a chip? And like, can I make it move the way I want it to? I went to the corner deli and bought some nacho cheese and some chips and just started, messing around with it. I need to touch it. I need to play with it. I need to like do that. And I think for people at home or, in film school or whatever, that might want to get into product-based work, it's like, just choose something like this pencil. Like, how can you do something cool about this pencil? Like, there's a lot of possibilities in, Elmer's glue, whatever it is. This is my kid's like homeschooling desk here.
You'll be able to answer if it's possible the more tests you do on it.
Yeah, but I'd much rather somebody that has bigger ideas than what's possible than somebody that doesn't think big enough. When we're looking for new directors, that's the biggest thing we're looking at is like, show me your biggest idea, like, do a treatment that like sells me on something, like I could teach you the technical stuff, we could execute it, we could do all that stuff, but if you don't think big enough, then I can't teach that. Think big and then multiply it by 1,000.
Think big times 1,000.
Yes.
By Steve Giralt. You should put that on a calendar or something, or like a poster or something like that. Well, let's do this. Let's go through a couple of these videos and a couple of these big ideas now. Let's start with the first clip. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it. This is the burger drop. This is my test that I did to show people what I meant by visual engineering. It was my take on how do I show a burger in a completely different way and not do it in CGI.
And this was completely a test. Completely a test. This is not for any client. This is just something you did for fun.
This is like the end result of like so many months of work and learning and failure and testing and that to get this. And then the funny thing is though, we just did a similar shot for a sandwich company and we did this shot in basically like an hour and a half. That's the thing about engineering, and once you figure out a process, it's easy to repeat it.
Where did the idea for this kind of thing come from?
So this came from my realm as working as a still photographer, where I did a campaign for Budweiser. It was called Bud and Beers. And I was like, these photos just don't do it justice. They're just like sitting there and they're static. So I was like, oh, how do I tell this story in a Steve way, in a visual engineering way? And this is kind of the result of that, where it's like, I really wanted to highlight each ingredient for a certain amount of time on the screen and then show you the same end result.
What are we seeing here? What were the big challenges into making a rig
like
this?
Man, all the challenges. This is the ketchup and mustard collision. So for this, I 3D printed a catapult. You can see at the bottom, there's kind of like gray wheels that are like gears. I basically made it so that they like interlock to each other as gears so that I only had to move one side and both moved exactly at the same time, because I was looking through this for this collision right in the middle. So that was powered by this like air powered cylinder. So when you like put high pressure into it, the thing turns. So that's what kind of turned this thing really quickly. And then there's like little cups at the end of these like plexi rods, have Never Wet sprayed on it. It's like this super hydrophobic coating. We played with like putting oil on it, but apparently cold oil actually makes things stick more, not less. So it's just like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, if you play it, whoop, like it is like, soup, like that camera is moving super fast because obviously we're shooting slow motion. Once again, I learned a lot on this job, and I learned the fact that the exact weight of the ketchup and mustard affected the timing. Like if it was like a tiny bit heavier, it would hit a little bit later. If it was a little lighter, it would hit earlier. So like now that's kind of a rule that we do. Anytime we're trying to do precision stuff, that we measure the weight of everything, and everything is super standardized. And we usually use some sort of a driving force motor pneumatic that is way stronger than it needs to be for the job.
And it's like the building block of like a moving piece for these kinds of product shots, right?
Yeah, we use them a lot. Yeah, because they're like, these are air powered, so you need an air compressor like this that you would buy at Home Depot, whatever, and basically use this air to move objects. And it's super efficient and actually really cheap to work with.
So it's actually not that expensive to be able to start like playing with early pneumatics and stuff like that?
No, yeah, super cheap. And we actually, on the Garage Learnings YouTube, you'll see we have an Amazon store that points you towards all the stuff that we use. You see there's a gap under the top bun, and then the next layer is pickles, like further down. So that's the gap I left for that ketchup and mustard collision, because I knew that was going to be a separate shot, because trying to do it all at the same time was impossible. But the really cool thing about the robot is it repeats the same thing at the exact speed at the same time every time. So where that's the tomato from that end shot joining together with the lettuce from the other shot. That was like sleight of hand. It was like a magic trick. So let's talk about this rig a little bit here, because now you can see it better in this shot. You have these metal bars, and then you see those like things on the right side is the servos I was talking about. They're RC car servos that I put a scalpel blade on. There's rubber bands that are wrapped around this metal frame that are just stretched across with my little Arduino computer rig that I built to control this thing. At the specific time I want, it cuts that rubber band right before the camera sees it. Literally, it's just like one microsecond before the camera gets into frame. I drew this out myself. This program called SketchUp to like pre-vis this whole thing. And that's something I still do today, which is like I need to pre-visualize these things and get the camera in there and be able to look around things. So in some ways I use CGI to imagine how I could do things practically.
What about the lighting for a shot like this too?
We lit basically with the idea that we knew all these things were gonna be where they are and they're gonna land, and we wanted a perfect burger at the end. So I usually light the ending first and then work backwards. This is all tungsten lights actually. So I think there was 4 10Ks for the background, like behind it, that was hitting on this white piece of plexiglass.
Did you say 4 10Ks hitting
4
the
10Ks,
background?
yeah. Up front, I think it's a 12K that is kind of beaming in through that diffusion screen at the burger. Because we were shooting so fast, we're 1,000 frames a second. And once again, we wanted it all to be pretty sharp too. As you could tell, like the final footage is pretty sharp. So we were like F8, and that's a lot of light. The next problem I ran into was the robot itself takes time to accelerate into a shot, right? It can't move magically into full speed. You see this whole rig is on what looks like an air cylinder on the top there. So basically I accelerated the rig towards the robot as the robot was accelerating so I could get it up to speed faster than what the robot could do. And I needed all the time I could get to get this whole thing to happen, because the robot had to move 3 feet in like half a second. So it's kind of crazy. It's in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, I just did that.
Now, before we move on, I want to remind everybody about our incredible friends over at Storyblocks, which again is the most reliable source of footage for professional boxers. Jokes aside, we at Indie Mogul can rest assured knowing that basically anything we could ever want can be found and searched up over at storyblocks.com. So, in fact, just recently we had to edit light leak overlays for an episode, and of course, Storyblocks delivered. And since Storyblocks offers a subscription plan for unlimited downloads for 790,000 HD and 4K video clips, guess what? we did not have to spend too much time trying to pick and find the exact light leak we needed, maybe because there were so many options, which was a good thing to have as a filmmaker. In fact, we could download one, slot it into the timeline, download another one, slot it into the timeline, then we could repeat as necessary and figure out exactly what we needed. And at just $29 a month, it has been absolutely worth it for us. So if you're interested in trying it out, make sure you get started today by going over to storyblocks.com/IndieMogul, which we will put in the link in the description down below. But now, back to the episode.
All right, here we go. So this is a Jack Honey drink spot that they wanted to do. So they came to me with the ideas on this one, like roughly speaking, and then it was for us to execute. The finished spot doesn't look like we did anything super duper duper crazy. Like, oh, you dropped this lime in here and it looks like it's spinning on a turntable or something. That one shot was so hard. It was probably one of the hardest shots.
What are you talking about?
This shot right here, this one right here with this lime dropping into us.
You showed me like a robot that separated into like a burger. What is hard about a lime falling into a
So when they came to us, they were like, oh, we saw this video where like the camera was spinning around an object. It's the object's not moving. The object's stationary, but the camera's moving around it, but there's a background that's moving with the camera around this. This is the crazy rig we built. This took like a week to build this thing. Basically, we got the camera going, I think it was like 32 miles per hour. It was like 20 Gs or something.
You're talking about the speed of a car.
You could tell it's like coming towards you and you're moving around it and it gives you that 3D effect.
That matrix effect, that bullet time type thing.
Yeah. But the funnest part about this one is, so we built this crazy rig and the idea came from the client and we did it and it was insane. And then we were like, we got to do something better with this thing. We got to do something cooler. So then we rebuilt it stronger. We repainted it blue. We put like safety cables on it to like hold it together because
you don't want it to fly off. You don't want a camera
we
to,
had
like,
a background break off and fly off because it was moving so fast. The force was so strong that the phantom camera started tilting up like throughout the shot. So we actually had to bolt it flat to the metal of the rig that we built. And here you can see how it's a very different look and feel because you're actually moving around that splash as you're kind of going around it. And then the other challenge was lighting. This thing's spinning at whatever, 200 RPM, you can't have any cables going into it. So the whole setup was lit with LEDs we built. And that briefcase you can see under the table, that black like Peloton case, has like batteries in it and all these like doodads that we built to power the lights all from battery. And then we had to automate the way it dropped the lime because obviously nobody could be in there to drop it. So we had a little motor that like released it and dropped it. And for the balls, we did the same thing. We had a little thing that held all the balls and then a little trap door that like opened up on command. We used like a RC car remote control kind of thing. But this is an example of what happens a lot with us where a client's like, oh, just do this. How hard could that be?
Can I ask, is there even a possible like indie version of this? Or
people have been doing it on Instagram and they've been trying it. Like a guy recently did one, which I thought was genius, took apart his bicycle and he got basically the back wheel of the bicycle and the crank, and that had the gearing and everything to get it up to speed of the back wheel really fast. And then he mounted his camera to the outside of the wheel. And then he mounted a little object on the top of like the hub, the part that doesn't spin on the bicycle. But like, dude, like, yes, you could do this.
I love it. Steve, what is this clip that we're looking at here?
This is the States blowing up. No, this is.
Oh, it's very, very dark.
Yeah, exactly. This is a pro bono piece I shot, completely self-funded as well, completely my concept. It was basically almost 4 years ago now where the country was so divided about the election and like Trump and all the things coming in. How do I use like the skills that I have shooting slow motion and tabletop and all the things I do to tell an interesting story that's eye-catching that will get people to maybe just pause for a second and think about what they're saying and who they're saying it to and why they're getting so torn up about it. And that's kind of where this whole thing got sparked from. And I was like, oh, well, how do I tell that story? How about we just concentrate on the political map and how people voted and the states themselves and choose some blue ones, choose some red ones. Basically what we did is we 3D printed these little stencils, and we had an awesome stylist, Rachel, whose job was to lay down layers of powder. It's like this holy powder from India. And then basically we would put that over a black rubber sheet, and she would lay down layers of powder on it and then make it perfect and beautiful and clean up all the edges, which is like so time consuming. And then it would take me nothing but like half a second to bang the bottom of the sheet with a stick, and it would all go exploding up towards the phantom camera above it. And these are some of my early versions of my liquid cooled LED lights. We had a fan, like a huge, it was like a electric radiator fan. It was like this huge, like 24-inch fan above, like sucking the powder straight up. That definitely did kind of keep it all moving. For this, I wanted to wrap it around with light, but still have like edge to the light. So there's a lot of little baby Fresnels, which are the ones like the liquid cooled lights. The liquid cooled lights I made, I was like, oh, I want them to be flicker free, because at Phantom, flicker is a problem, and all the power supplies I found were like had flicker, or they were like super expensive. So I just used batteries, because batteries are pure DC power, and there's no ripple, there's no flicker. So basically this whole thing was run off of like electric bike batteries. Yeah, so this one was fun. But I mean, for me, I think as an artist, and that's the thing people gotta remember, like you're an artist first, like I'm an engineer second, like creative always leads the engineering. Just because like there's this cool thing doesn't mean like, oh, that's a story automatically. It has to have a story. So for me as an artist, if I want to react to something happening in the world, and I have the ability because I own the gear and I have all this stuff, like I think it's really important for people to tell stories of how they feel about things to the world.
Knowing the visual limits and knowing what you can do also help you tell kind of bigger ideas and help people see things in a way that they haven't really seen them before.
Clients see these things and then they hire you because they're like, oh my God, we love the story you did, and we love the way you did that with powder, and like, oh, we did a bunch of powder jobs right after that. If you tell a good story in a good way and you put it out there, eventually people will find you.
For people that have never looked into robotics at all and want to learn, what do you recommend just to like start playing around with?
Find a slider that you can motorize somehow. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy, or just a simple motor, one stepper motor that's like $20, and an Arduino that's $30, and then a driver, and like, so less than $100 you could have a motor that you can control, and you could do all sorts of stuff with that. You could pour things, you can make a turntable out of it. We're not putting it together ourselves because we want you to learn how it works, and we want you to put it together, and then therefore you could change it later because you have an understanding of how it works. By learning the basics of all this stuff, I think you could be way more powerful in the long run than just buying a thing that does a thing, not knowing how it works really, other than, you know, like, oh, it's a slider, see? Actually, my goal and my hope is that you're gonna take something we did and make it better.
For people that are not sure or have questions too, can they ask you questions? And if so, where can they find you too?
I'm Steve Giralt on Instagram. We're also The Garage, and then there's The Garage Learning, which is on YouTube and on Instagram.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it.
You know, I look forward to hearing from all the people out there and see what people think.
Alrighty guys, there you have it. There's your episode with Steve Giralt on commercial cinematography and robotics, and how this might actually be something that you actually need to learn as a filmmaker. So if you're interested in checking out more about him, we'll leave his links in the description in the bio down below.
Also, a huge thank you to Storyblocks. Start saving both time and money, just like us, by heading over to storyblocks.com/IndieMogul.
Also, don't forget we've got a podcast, Steve Giralt, where we actually talk about how he became the crazy visual engineer that he is today. So if you're interested in checking that out, we'll leave that down there as well. But Indie Mogul, that's it for me. Hope you guys are staying safe, taking care. Of course, catch you guys in the next one.
Some of these things like could be painful to like reset, and you're like, oh, whoops, I broke the plexiglass that it was on. Now we gotta go again, you know?
Yeah, it's like in a stop motion studio, the person that kicks the camera.
Oh,
it's like, oh, what is wrong with you?